Hey, good evening, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Today we are learning Maseches Avodah Zara Daf Nun Gimel. Yirtzeh Hashem will jump ahead a little bit and do some of Nun Daled Amud Aleph as well. Don't know how much it's going to help considering the size of Nun Daled Amud Beis, which is a triple blot. Triple Amud is just a very, very large. It is granted. Um, and I got it up, but still got to get through all the words. So Yirtzeh Hashem over the course of the next many days, we have a couple of short blot at Nun Hey Nun Vav are short. So I hope by Shabbos, Nun Hey, Amud Beis, and Nun Vav in its entirety is very small. So we're getting there. We're getting there. Doing my working hard. All right, here we go. We're at a new Mishnah, 10 lines down on Nun Gimel Amud Aleph. Here, the Mishnah is talking about being mevatel avodah zara, an idea that I'm Haaretz, I would never have known there was an idea. I would have said Asherah all the way. We would have had, no, you can be Mavatal and it can be usable again. My nafkamin is the Isser Hana, is that when something is Avodah Zarah, there's an Isser Hana. When something is Mavotal from being Avodah Zarah, then it's Mutter. So let's figure out how to do this. Ketzad Mavadla, Kata Rosh Ozna, you cut off the top of its ear. Rosh Chotma, the end of its nose. Rosh Etzba, cut off a fingertip. Or Pachsa, Afal Gav Shalochisra, if you deform, disfigure something, even though you haven't removed anything, right? So you take a hammer and you smash the face, and let's say it's made out of aluminum, and the face just indents. You didn't remove anything. So is that enough? All of these cases are examples of bidla, where the avodah zara is now considered to be mevutal, and now it's mutter b'amna. The Mishnah continues, however, in contrast, rok b'fanah, if you spit in front of it, hishtin b'fanah, if you spit in front of it, gerura, if it's dragged, zarak b'asatzo, the one throws feces at it, hareza eina b'tela. And Rashi here gives us a little bit of the color as to what's going on. Rashi is about 12 lines down, Dibur Maschel eina b'tela, a little bit more. They got angry for the moment. It was a momentary lapse in control of his feelings. But then he goes back to doing Avodah Zarah. So next part of the Mishnah, Machra o Mashkana, if it's sold or if it's used as collateral, this is a Machlokes Tanoim, Rabbi Omer Bitel, v'chachamim Omrim lo Bitel. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. One of the cases of the Mishnah was Pachsa Afal Pi Shelo Chisra, that if you disfigure it, but you don't remove anything from it, we said it's bitla, that it's going to be batal. Kilo chisra, but my bitla. Everything's still there. I understand it's disformed. No, I got it, but it shouldn't be enough l'chora. Says Gemara, really, it's because it's been disformed in the face. If you would have hit its leg and the leg had a little dent in it, no problem. But if you take a hammer and you just go straight for the face, so this is an interesting split, right? We would have said that, I would have thought that any damage that you caused to the Avodah Zarah intentionally, any damage, we're only talking about Shelo Chasra, that if you don't take away, right? If you cut off the ear, it doesn't matter that it's not the face. Here, what we're saying is that any physical damage, if I sledgehammer the whole thing but leave the face intact, it's still not batel. It's only a din in the panim, a din in the paneha. That is when we say that it is going to be considered batel, even though nothing was removed. We had said rakak b'fanev ishin b'fanev minani. How do we know the heter in that case? Sorry, not the heter. How do we know that it's still not batel in that case? Amar Chizkiah to Amar Kra. We have a pasuk by Akir Av. That when one gets upset with and angry with their deity, their lowercase g, their God, their avodah zarah, then they look upwards towards Hashem, which is a sign that someone might be doing tshuva. And then after that, what do we see? That even though while he was frustrated, he looked up at his deity. And in those moments, he was rakak b'fanav v'hishsim b'fanav, even though that's true, but he'll come back to his ways. This is where Rashi got the idea from, that he might get angry, but then afterwards, palachla, he's going to end up serving the Avodah Zarah, el eretz yabit, and that's how we know that if one is rok b'fanav b'chule, all of those cases, there is no bittul in all of those cases. Machra o mashkana Rebbe Omer Bitel, when it's when the Avodah Zarah is sold or when the Avodah Zarah is used as a collateral. So there we saw that Rebbe says that that's considered a bittul. However, the Baal Plukta says that it's not considered a bittul. Let's talk about this case. Zeiri Amar Rabbi Yochanan, V'Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar Rab. So we have Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. One is talking about when we're discussing someone who works with smelting, with shaping and the melting of and the reforming of metals. Aval b'tzorif Yisrael divrei hakol bitel. But had it been that we were talking about it's a tzorif Yisrael, so then in that case, says the Gemara, what would the din have been? It would have been divrei hakol bitel. So maybe the machlokas between the two is only when we're talking about selling or giving collateral to a tzoref oved kochavim. That's shita number one. V'chad amar no, b'tzoref Yisrael machlokas. That really, even if I were to sell or give collateral to the item, give collateral to a Jew who is a smelter, so then that's where the machlokas is. And if that's true, according to approach number two in the Amoraim, that if we were to say that the tzoref to whom the Avodah Zara was sold or was given as a mashkon, if that person was a yid, what then would we have said about a goy? If in fact the second sheet in the Amoraim is right, that the machlokas between Rebbe and the Chachamim about machra or mashkana as to whether or not there's bittul is talking about a case of a smelter who is given to a Jew who is a smelter. Would we then say that had it been given to a goy, then it would not have been batel? Or no, perhaps the second shita would say that it's even a machlokes tanoim, even if it's given to a goy. So Toshma, let's see if we can figure this out. We're 2/3 of the way down on Nun Gimel Amud Aleph, and we're trying to answer this question. Let's review the question. Our Mishnah told us that in the case of machra or mashkana, that if a goy sells or gives an item as collateral, then Rebbe says it's batel. That's enough. He's showing his disinterest. And the Chachamim say no. The Chachamim say that it's still considered to be intact and it's not batel. And the Gemara wants to know, is this machlokas when the item was sold or given as collateral to a goyish smelter, or if it was given to a Yiddish smelter? And if it was given to a Yiddish smelter, according to that approach, if that's the machlokas, would we also say there's a machlokas if it was then given to the tzoreh ove kochavim, yes or no? So Tashma, the Gemara 2/3 of the way down says, Da Amar Rebbe. Rebbe taught us as follows. Nirin Devarai, Rebbe, who's of the opinion, who says Bitel, he says, I say that things are batel kshemachra lechabalam. I say that it's only considered bitel when I'm selling it to be destroyed. It's a pawn shop, right? So that pawn shop has no desire to keep your item. He flips it by raising the price and he moves on. So every time you go into a pawn shop, you're always selling low, and they're buying low and they're going to sell high. That's their model. That's how they make money. So says Rebbe, when am I right that if it's machra or mashkana that there's bittul? That's kshemachra lechabala. That's when it's being sold to be destroyed. V'divrei chaverai, my chachamim, who argued against me, who said lo bittul, that's shemachra laovda. Then I'm asking with them that if in fact it's being sold to service, right? It's on eBay. I'm selling this idol lightly used. Oh, so if the person if you're trying to sell it as it's going to be used again, pashut that's going to still be lo bitul. Now that's interesting because user number one didn't want it anymore, and he's selling it to someone who does want it. But I'm asking, I don't know the answer to this. If user number one is selling something to user number two, isn't it true that user number one doesn't want the Avodah Zara anymore? And if so, why isn't that bittul? Afal pi, that he's selling to someone who wants to use it, but his ratzon is, I don't want this Avodah Zara anymore. He's not debunking the Avodah Zara, but he's saying, I'm not interested. So this is really the belly of the beast as to why there's a machlokas. What is happening over here when user number one sells the Avodah Zara to user number two? Do we say that lowers the status and therefore it's batel, or no, because he's selling it for the sake of use for Avodah Zara, not as a statue, not as a garden gnome, nothing. It's being used for Avodah Zara mamish. So then even Rebbe would say like the Chachamim.
Smelter is someone who's going to destroy it.
Yeah, that's their. That what?
Even though it's only collateral.
That's implied from the Gemara. Yeah, that's implied.
There's a potential of him being destroyed. Not because he may get it back and it won't be destroyed.
Could be. But that what the Gemara is dealing with over here, and the Rishonim talk about the difference between them. as to the motivations of a tzoref of avodas kochavim and a tzoref Yehudi. That by a Jew, if you give it to a smelter who's a Jew, there's no question he's going to melt it down because he knows what it is. Goodbye, I'm getting rid of this. Asherah, whatever svara the Jew would have. By the Goy, we don't know. That's why we're not sure where the machlokas is between the Tanakama, between Rebbe and the Chachamim. So this brisa taught us in the name of Rebbe that Rebbe knows he's right, that there's bittul when it's being sold to be destroyed. So that means if he's going to sell it to the smelter and the smelter says, we don't even resell, we just melt and resell. Oh, that's pasha. Then Rebbe says pasha that it's bittul because user number one who's selling it to the smelter, obviously he's foregoing on this thing ever existing ever again in this format. But then Rebbe in the second part of the brisa said, but the Chachamim are right that if it's being sold from user one to user two, I just don't want this avodah, I want to upgrade. So now I'm going to get a new avodah Zara that's bigger, that's better, that's more expensive. So I'm going to sell it to user number two, make a mint. And therefore, the Gemara has, even Rebbe would say that it's considered to not be bata.
Rebbe,
Say that again, what?
I'm trying to wrap my head around Rebbe analyzing his own Avodah. Like, is
Me
he
too.
saying, I mean, is he saying that's not what I meant? I mean, like, what is he saying? Like, is that still his
So
opinion?
I love that you asked this because this has been brewing in my head since this morning. Not the whole time, obviously, but it strikes me that Rebbe is doing one of two things. He's either saying there's no machlokas, and when it is for the sake of Chabala, if I sell this for Chabala, everyone would agree that it is going to be batel. And my friends, I agree with them too, because Rebbe does agree with them. Rebbe agrees that if it's being sold for service to be used again, then even he would hold it tzasser.
Why didn't he say, like,
So
what I meant was
So
only,
approach number one is what I'm saying is that there's no machlokas, but I actually don't think that's correct. I didn't look in the Rishonim, I'm postulating. It seems to me that there really is a machlokas, and Rebbe's understanding of the two shitas is Rebbe's understanding, but the Chachamim don't agree with his parsing of the cases. That's my assumption, but again, I didn't spend what?
Rashi says they both had Kabbalahs that it applied to both. Rebbe had Kabbalah that his halacha applied to both.
Oh.
like Masur.
He doesn't understand why, because I understand my opinion for this, then for that. I don't know why my opinion is correct in the second scenario, and their opinion is correct in the second.
Okay, so they're arguing. The Maaseh, they're arguing.
That's
Yeah.
Rashi.
Okay. Okay, let's continue. Says the Gemara in this brisa where Rebbe speaks about Chabala and about Uvda, that it's going to be served again, asks the Gemara, 3/4 of the way down, my Chabala. What did Rebbe mean when he said that I think I'm right that the Avodah Zara would be batal when it's sold to be destroyed? Umay Uvda. Why are the Chachamim? What was the case of Uvda where the Chachamim would be right that they had it been sold there that they hold that lo batal that the Avodah Zara would still be intact? If you want to say that when Rebbe says that he thinks he's right, it's that the Avodah Zarah will be fully destroyed. And if la'ovda means la'ovda mamish, so my time on demand amar bitel, according to the one who says bitel, which is Rebbe, how could you ever say that it's going to be batel if user one is selling it la'ovda to user two? Pashat that nothing's changed. It's still the same Avodah Zarah. Someone's going to serve it when they get it in the mail. And umay time demand amar load bitel, and according to the one who says that Chabala is Chabala mamish, then why would anyone say lo? Why would the Chachamim argue that it's going to be melted down in 20 minutes? So it can't be that when Rebbe was in this brisa that he was using the classical, categorical definitions of lechabala, which is full destruction, and leovda, which is that it will still be around. Elalav, says the Gemara. What does lechabala mean when Rebbe says, I think I'm right about Chabala? The Gemara says, Lemisha asid lechabala. He says, I'm gonna smelter, whatever the verb is, smelt. I'm gonna smelt this down the road. But not today. Umanu, who is that going to be? That's a tzorif Yisrael. So he says that if you sell or you give a mashgon to a yid, and the Jew says, I'm not going to melt it today, but I'll melt it down the road. In that case, Rebbe says there's bittul, and the Chachamim say, no, there is not bittul. And le'ovda, similarly, that's lemishe asid le'ovda. someone who said that I'm not going to serve it today. I have enough deities in my garden. I'm good for now, but I'll keep one in my back pocket. Umanu, that's soref ove kochavim. Vishmamina, what we see from here is based on, this is very nuanced, based on how we define the terminologies of the Chabala and the Ovda and the Brisa of Rebbe. What we see from there is Vishmamina, bein bazeh uvein bazeh machlokas. That we see that the machlokas between Rebbe and the Chachamim in regards to Machra o Mashkana is true, both in regards to the Tzoref Israel and in regards to the Tzoref Ove Kochavim, and in both cases is where there's a delay of gain, where the Jew says, I won't destroy it today, but I might in the future. The guy says, I won't serve it today, but I might in the future. So that's the answer that we're suggesting. The Gemara says, lo, that's not correct. 3 lines before the wide line. That's not true. It's not the right way to look at it. Hachi Kamar, this is the right way to understand Rebbe's Brisa. Amar Rebbe, Nirin dvarai lechaverai kshemachra lechabala. I am right over my friends when it comes to Chabala. And Umanu, and who then would it have been sold to in such a case, to a Tzoref Israel? Sha'af chaverai lo nechlaku elak shemachra laovda. Even my friends, the Chachamim, they only argue when it's being sold for Ovda. Aval Chabala moduli. So this is a whole new definition of that brisa, and it seems it looks a shtickle like a brisa itself. It doesn't say like Tnan or Tanya, anything like that, but the language seems quite similar to the Mishnah before. Anyways, this is a rejection of our answer, and therefore we actually don't know if there's a machlokas in both cases, both if we actually don't know if the machlokas Rebbe and the Chachamim by Machra o Mashkana was true only by a Tzoref Yisrael and even by a Tzoref Ove Kochavim, or if it's only by a Yisrael. Meisve, the Gemara says, Halokeach grutos. Grutos, says the Gemara, these are small pieces of metal. Halokeach grutos min ha'ovdei kochavim. If somebody takes a collection, they buy a container of small pieces of metal min ha'ovdei kochavim. As they were sifting through, like they have these things on TV where you get to buy a little storage unit that no one's been in 10 years, whatever the case may be. You bought a whole thing, 10 pounds of metal from a guy. But you didn't know what was in it. You just thought it was 10 pounds of metal. And then, as you look inside, there's a classic deity that's in there for the guy. If he hasn't paid yet, then he should give it back. If the Mashiach has happened, then then he has to take that which he purchased. He has to take the Avodas Kochavim and throw it into the Yam HaMelech. So says the Gemara 5 lines before the bottom of the page. If you want to say that the Chachamim, that Rebbe and the Chachamim argue in regards to a Tzoref Yisrael, Hamani, and this brisa is the Rabbanan that even if it was to a Jew, it would not be batel. That I totally understand. But Ella, if you want to say that it's also a machlokas with a smelter who is a goy, aval b'tzoref Yisrael divrei hakol bitel, then that would be the opinion of that a tzoref Yisrael, that everyone would agree that if it was sold or given to a Yisrael, that it is mevotal, hamani. There's no shita like that. So says the Gemara, Shiny Hasam, that case is different. The adaita de grutos zavin, adaita de ova avodas kochavim lo zavin. That case is different. The case is not comparable. You weren't trying to buy an avodah zara. All you were doing was buying a container, 10 pounds of metal from a goy. So because you weren't trying to buy the avodah zara, it just happened to be that there was a small avodah zara in there. So then the cases are really not comparable. Tanu Rabbana. The rabbis teach us in a brisa, continuing to analyze what creates bittul in avodah zara. Lava aleha, if you lent something against it, oh shenafla aleha mapoles, or if a building falls down on top of the avodah zara, oh sheganvu halistin, or if thieves stole it, oh shehinichua habaylim v'halchu lemedinas hayam, the goy was living in the middle of Idaho, He leaves his avodah zarah in his house, sells his house, nobody ever touches it. He just pasha leaves, no intent, no plans to come back. In all of these cases, what would be the din klape bittul? So the Gemara says, if the Gemara says, if that the people that were fighting with Yoshua at the time, these were the Amorim, the Amori people. So if the like the Amori people, they thought they were going to win, they left with intention to come back. Aina Betela, even though they were destroyed and decimated. But why wasn't it Batel? Because at the end of the day, what was their intention when they left for war? Their intention was to win the war and come back. They thought they could, just flick away the Jews like a little bug on the cholent. No, that's not correct. They lost. But when they left their tables, they ended up getting schmattered. They got destroyed. So because that's true, but when they left the table, their intentions were to come back. So they never had intention to be Mevatel. Now, the Mishnah that we just quoted over here at the bottom of Nun Gimel Amud Aleph quoted a handful of things. It's not a Mishnah, actually. It's a Tosefta. We said that if there was a loan, if a building fell on it, if it was stolen by people, or if the Bailim left it. Why do we need 4 cases? And here, the Gemara gives a multi-layered tzrichusa, that teaches us how to analyze this. By the way, one of the early Muslim authors of Muslim law in the 700s, he was apparently a Yid who decided to go another direction. I can't remember his name right now, but it sounds like Ibn Khalafta, something along those lines. And we actually see in that early literature this model of a tzrichusa. If I didn't have this, I would have thought that, therefore we need this. If I didn't have that, I would have thought this, therefore we need that. And it's found in some of the early Muslim legal jargon there, because he was a Yid, he was an Erlich Yid. He used to sit in the base medrash in Ner Yisrael. All of a sudden, he decided to go the other direction. So sometimes we see these like crossbreeding of terminologies and of wisdom, and this kind of thing made it into other places. So let's learn the Tzrichusa. Why is it that this Tosefta needed to have so many cases? So the Gemara says, "V'tzricha, ditan lo ve'aleh." If we were only talking about the case of a loan, midelo zavna lo batla, it wasn't sold, so therefore it's not batel. It was just given out as a loan. Aval nafal aleh mapoles, but had a building fallen on top of it, midelo kamefani la. If I don't get up and try to clean that area, what am I showing about the deity? Lost cause. And therefore, ema vitule batla, and the word tzricha should not be here. Tzrichusa only has the word tzricha at the beginning and the end. So the kisve yad over here, as you can see on the side, it says tzricha leisa bidfusim yeshanim of a kisve yad. So here, the word tzricha should not appear. The tzrichusa is bookended by the words tzricha, but not in the middle. And we're still in the middle. So let's read it properly. Ema betule batla. And therefore, we needed to have both the case of love aleha and nafla leha mapoles. Vitana nafla leha mapoles. If I only would have had that case, mishum de savar hamanachas kolemas de ba'ina lashkilnala. I know where it is. Whenever I'm ready to go get it, I'll go get it. The bricks are heavy. I don't want to have to move everything right now. But if you don't chase after the thieves who stole it, so by virtue of the fact that you didn't go chase after the thieves who stole it, that shows your intent, and therefore betule batla, and therefore we need that case as well. Again, here too, skip the word tzricha. And v'itana ganvu halistin, if all we had was that people stole it, well, mishum de savar, iovet kochavim shakila, had it been that it was a guy who stole it, miflach palachla, baruch hagoy. He's going to say, baruch avodah zara, someone's going to at least be worshiping it. They should at least enjoy it. And this is such a holy guy that he's like, okay, they stole it. As long as someone's worshiping it, I don't mind. But Yisrael shakla, had it been that a Jew stole it, I did demeha yakarin, because an avodah zara had a lot of financial value to it. It was made out of precious materials. So then mizav and leila oved kochav palachla. It's still going to end up in the hands of a guy. What's the Jew going to do with it? The Jew's going to sell it to a guy at a premium. Aval but because if somebody picks up and they leave their avodah zara behind, so midelo shaklu behadayu, because the homeowners who left their avodah zara behind betule batlua, therefore tzricha. So what the Gemara is saying is that we needed all of the cases in the Tosefta to make sure we knew that in all of those cases, because there's competing svaras, but because we knew that in all of those locations, in all of those cases, that there were different svaras, and I could have come up with a svara lakula. Therefore, we need the tzrichusa to teach us that that is not true. All of them are going to be cases where it's eina betela. Says the Gemara, a quarter of the way down on Nun Gimel Amud Beis. Oh gosh. We had said at the top of the page on the top line that Imasidan Lachzor Kimelchemes Yeshua eina betela. We had said that if a person um, was planning on coming back, but they didn't come back. A goy was planning on coming back, but he is daito lachzor, as we would call it in our parlance. We know the halachos of Hilchos Yantav and Yom Tov Shein Shel Galias. We, broadly speaking, passing like Rav Moshe Feinstein. I lived in Eretz Yisrael for 5 years after we got married. In our 5th year, we had actually made the plan to stay. And that year for Pesach, for the first and only time, we kept 1 day of Yantav. Why? Because we didn't fill out the paperwork yet. Ramosha doesn't care about nefesh benefesh. It's daito lachzor. So my das was to stay. I was in Eretz Yisrael. I knew I was going to go back for the summer, but it was daito lachzor. I kept 1 day. V'chein lehefech. If I'm in chutz la'aretz, but it's daito lachzor, I'm moving back to Eretz Yisrael. I'm just home here for. So then you also keep 1 day. Okay, it's fill in b'farhes, yam malacha b'farhes. All those halachos that we have to figure out. Fine. So here too we have a din of daito lachzor, that imasidan lachzor kimilchemes Yoshua, that the Amori people wanted to come back. They didn't know they were going to lose. What was their intention when they left? We'll be back soon. So therefore, eina betela. Midi milchemes Yoshua mehadar hadar, but they never ended up coming back. Says the Gemara, you're 100% right. Achi kamar, what can we extract from this? This is the concept of daito lachzor. Imasidan lachzor hareu kimilchemes Yoshua ve'eina betela. So says the Gemara, v'lama misle b'milchemes Yoshua. Why do you have to talk about Yoshua? Just say daito lachzor or not daito lachzor. Who cares about Yoshua? So it's nothing to do with the Amori people. They're but one example of a billion. Why do we pick that one? So of course the Gemara doesn't mince any words. It's obvious that there's a reason why they chose this. And milsa agav orcha kamash malon. This comes to teach me an ancillary point. We're raising Yehoshua to teach us the following. That if we have a Jew who stood up a brick in order to bow down to the brick, but he didn't, and a guy shows up and he worships the brick, so then asra. Then that's going to be asra. Says the Gemara halfway down on Nun Gemel Amud Beis Min da asra. From where do we know that if a yid stands up a brick and he doesn't serve the brick, but a guy and Oved Kochavim says, "Oh, the Givaldik brick, I'm going to go worship the brick." How do we know that that's going to be asra min da asra? Amar Rebbe Lazar, kitchila shel Eretz Yisrael. Just like when the Jews first inherited Eretz Yisrael. What does that mean? The halacha is that if there's an Asherah tree in Eretz Yisrael, when the Yidden inherit the land of Eretz Yisrael, they have to destroy all of the Asherah trees. Now, michti. The only time something will ever become Asur is if someone's going to worship it. But who worshipped the Asherah trees before the Jews got there? The Shivas Amamin, who were Goyim. The problem is, says the Gemara, that Yerusha hilahem avosehem, that Eretz Yisrael was a Yerusha for the Yidden, and the Ein Adam Oser Davar She'eno Shalom. If, really historically, halachically speaking, Eretz Yisrael, even during the times of the Shivas Ha'amim, before the Jews moved in, if it was always a Yerusha for the Yidden, then even if someone were to worship a tree, Ein Adam Oser Davar She'eno Shalom. So how could it be that we had to burn all the trees down? We shouldn't have had to burn any trees down, because the Shivas Ha'amim doesn't belong to them. It's a Yerusha. It's a Yerusha for the Yidden. So therefore, we should not have to burn anything down. And if you want to say, no, forget about that. Before the Shivas, let's say in the times of Avram Avinu, when Avram had it, the Shivas Ha'amim weren't there. Avram was there. So Avram had Eretz Yisrael at that time. So maybe we should say, Avraham was a very influential person. He was doing kiruv right and left. He was very good with his words. You could have convinced a guy to be mevatel the Asherah tree. Why didn't we say that? Now we have to broaden our thinking, because we know that the Jews violated Avodah Zara, whatever they violated, not a pashat sugya, whatever they violated with the Egel Azav. Galu adataihu. What did the Jews show by serving the Egel? It showed that they revealed that they themselves were pro avodas kochavim at times in their history, in our history, Nebuch. That when there was a guy who would do avodah zara, They were doing shlichus on behalf of the Yidden. Therefore, hachanami, here too, Yisrael shezakaf levena, gal yadaite denichale bavodas kochavim. By virtue of the fact that he stood up the brick from horizontal to vertical, that showed us that the Yid had an interest in Avodah Zara, and v'chiyasa obed kochav mupalach la shleichusa didei ka'avid. Wow. And therefore the Gemara says that even though the Jew didn't do Avodah Zara, but he was like, I'm going to use a language that's probably not accurate, but gets the point across. He was Messiah Ledvar Avera. He stood up the brick. Then the guy shut up. He's like, Givaldik, a standing brick. I'm going to go bow down to the brick. I'm going to shecht korbanos to the brick. But the Jew didn't do that. You're right, but the Jew is Messiah. What did he do? The Gemara says he was Nichale Ba'avodas Kochavim. Says the Gemara, I hear the svara, the tzushtel from the egel to other forms of avodah zarah, but asks the Gemara, 2 lines before the wide lines, 2/3 of the way down, but dilma be'egel hu denichalu b'midi achrina. Look, Moshe was Boshe. She took a long time to come down. So the Jews said, Moshe's gone. With all the miscounting that the Jews did. So they thought he was gone. Maybe only by the Egel were they passionate about, were they Megala Das that they cared about. But who says about a brick that they stood the brick up all of a sudden they care about Avodah Zarah? That's not necessarily true. Maybe perhaps, says the Gemara, no, Amar, Kra'ele Elohecha Yisrael. This is plural. Says the Gemara, that the Jews, they were evil, they had a desire for many different deities, including, apparently, standing up a brick. We're not going to limit ourselves at that point. Once we know that the Yidden had a tam for Avodah Zara, so then if they do anything that's me'ain Avodah Zara, and in this case they stood up a brick, so then that's going to be problematic. I asks the Gemara, Ema kol debahadi egel nitzru mikan va'elech nishtari. Maybe only that everything that came along with an egel was nitzru, but everything else in the future was different. Says the Gemara, man muchach. Man muchach. Look at Rashi, the last one on the Gemara, man muchach, 2/3 of the way down. Mi yodea is a haisabos hashave is a nev da'acharechem. We don't have a log of when the Jews did avodah zarah. There unfortunately were a lot of Jews who did a lot of avodah zarah. Today we have different avodah zarahs, but back in the day they had proper avodah zarahs. We just don't know the timeline. Was it the brick one? Was that before? Was that at the same time of the egel? Was that? We don't know. We don't know. So in any case scenario where a Jew is involved in setting up an avodah zarah, even if he never served it, and then a goy came along and served it, the halacha would be that it is problematic. The Gemara says that the new Mishnah, most of the way down on Nun Gimel Amud Beis, avodas kochavim shehinichua ovdeha. If you have an avodah zara and everybody stops serving it, let's say there was an idol in the square in the middle of town, and all of a sudden all the goyim moved to another neighbor, they left the idol there. So we had this in this building. All the goyim left, they left a statue of Mary in the front of the building. Probably Pashtas wasn't avodah zara, like the way we talk about avodah zara. It's an icon maybe, but not avodah zara. Let's say it was for the moment, everybody packed up. So says the Gemara, B'shas shalom, if they left at a time of shalom, well, then why didn't they bring it with? The fact that they didn't bring it with, what does that show us? That they don't care about it, therefore it's batal, therefore it's muteres, therefore the Yisra Hana has dissolved. But b'shas milchama, if they're running because of whoever is fighting them, let's say in the Russia-Ukraine war, the Russians are coming in, and the Ukrainians are in the middle of serving Avodah Zarah, but there's rocket fire, so they leave. So then that doesn't mean that they're being mevatel the Avodah Zarah, and therefore there's no betel, and therefore asura. Says the Gemara, be mosios shel malachim. If there were these pedestals of kings, they would have these pedestals when a king would walk by. They'd put pedestals on the street. They'd put avodah zarahs on the pedestals. They were temporary items. Mutaros. Those are not problematic. Those don't have a din of Isser Hana, the pedestals, because they were only there temporarily. Says the Gemara, Amar of Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar Rab, Beis Nimrod, which is a reference to Migdal Bavel. We actually know exactly where this was. This is in the historical terminology, this was referred to as Temenanki, which was the name of Migdal Bavel. It was the name of Migdal Bavel in that particular city. And in fact, fascinating research. Smithsonian did this research on how they built it. We know exactly what it looked like also. It was a scaffolded tower with a wider base and then a narrower build and then a narrower build. Because if they would have built the building linearly, we know that they made them out of mud bricks. We know the approximate density, mass, and weight of a mud brick from back then. We have them. There are still some that are in museums right now. So mamish, we still have it. would that be Aser B'Hana? The building bricks of Migdal Bavel, would that be Aser B'Hana? So let's see, because that's mamish, that's the real deal. Let's say you're an archaeologist and you go to Itam and Anki right now, wherever it is in Iraq or Turkey. If you go there, are you allowed to touch a brick? Are you allowed to move it? So I don't know how Lamais it is. I don't know how many archaeologists there are, but we know exactly the footing where this place was. So says the Gemara, what about Beis Nimrod? Harei ki avodas kochavim sheinichua ovdeh b'shas shalom u'moter. Because they ran away, not at wartime. They had enough. They got bored. They got off their soapbox and they left. So therefore, it's batel. It was avodah zara, but it was batel, and it's therefore mutter. I have a question. Why is that avodah zara? They weren't worshiping the building, but the Gemara says that's what was happening. It was avodah zara, but it became mutter. It says the Gemara, afal gav dechi badrinhu rachamana kshas milchamadam. That even though when HaKadosh Baruch Hu mixed up all the languages and confused everyone, even though that is kshas milchama, they could have come back, and they didn't come back, and therefore it is considered to be mutter. Midolo hadar b'dulei batla. Fascinating. Where are we at? Okay, a few minutes left. We said that these pedestals that were used to put idols on top of, that those are not considered to be aser b'hana, they're not considered to be avodah zara proper, and therefore they can be used by a yid. Who cares that it's temporary? Avodah zara is avodah zara. What does temporary have anything to do with this? Because it was set up for when kings would walk by. Sometimes they wouldn't even walk down that path. So lav dafka that they would ever even use it. We don't know. And because of that. Huh? So that's not a good svara, unfortunately. That's what it sounds like in the Gemara, but it's not a halachic svara because safek deraisa l'chumra. The Yisra hanav avodah zara is nisra deraisa, no? Maybe it's nisra derabanan. What? Yeah. That's a pasuk in Chumash. I don't know. It sounded like a suffix to me. In my head, I just kept thinking it's suffix deraisa l'chumra. Oh no, Tosos. Last Tosos. Olchem derech acheres. The priests she'avdum lo asom avodas kochavim elo l'tzorach hamlachim. It would only be made into avodah zara when the king showed up. Uchsheron she'ein hamlachim chosheshin bahem gam heim mevatlanosam. So it doesn't even get to suffix because their protocol was deconsecrate. You know what I said. I would imagine. I have a feeling that's what's bothering Tosfos. Is that otherwise it should be mutter? It would be mutter because of a suffix. That doesn't make sense. Great question. Okay, says the Gemara, Ki asa Ula, when Ula showed up, Yosef Avimsa, he sat on one of these little pedestals, Avimsa Pigima, on a broken pedestal. Wasn't intact, it was broken. He was walking, he got tired. Amar le Rabbi Yehuda Lula. Rabbi Yehuda says, you can't sit on that. It's bimus shenifkam. You're not allowed to sit on that. It should be usher. This doesn't even stem with the previous parts of the Gemara because the previous parts of the Gemara said it's totally mutter. Now we'll see why that actually makes sense. Even if you want to say that there's no avodah zara for shvarim, for something that's broken, and this pedestal is pigima, as what the case was presented. But here, when it comes to the pedestal, we don't care if there's a little crack in the pedestal. No one's going to fix it. They're still going to put the avodah zara on top of it. It can handle all the weight, no problem. So Amar Le, Ula wanted to be respectful. Rabbi Yehuda, let's remember who Rabbi Yehuda was. Rabbi Yehuda was a Talmud of both Rav and Shmuel. That's why you see Amar Rabbi Yehuda Mar Rav and Amar Rabbi Yehuda Mar Shmuel. It's the same Rabbi Yehuda. He just had the opportunity. That's like the best resume for learning ever. You learned at Philly, you learned at the Mir, you learned at BMG. No, you learned in Rav's base medrash and Shmuel's base medrash. That was Rabbi Yehuda. So now Ula says back to Rabbi Yehuda, I don't want to burst any bubbles, but we don't paskin like your Rabbeim. So says the Gemara that Amar Le, Ula said, Man yohiv lon me afra de Rav Shmuel. If we had dust from where Rav and Shmuel sat, umal'inan inin, please fill my eyes up with that dust. I would love to be a part of what they said, but Rav Yochanan b'Reish Lakish Tamar Tarvav that bimus shenifkam mutter. If sitting on a broken pedestal would be mutter or not, and Rish Lakish and Rav Yochanan don't agree with Rav and Shmuel. I'm sorry to burst your bubble, Rav Yehuda. We don't paskin like your Rabbeim. And ve'afilu l'ma'an da'amar, 4 lines from the bottom, that ovdin l'shvarim. Even if you want to say that they would be willing to worship something that's broken, and maybe we should therefore asher this pedestal, which is pegima, hani mile avodah kochavim, the cave on the palcha, zilabei milsa lebetula. That's true in the avodah kochavim itself. The pasnesh, if the avodah zara is broken, fix it, replace it, do what you got to do. Aval hani, these platforms, these pedestals, shakle lahai, umaisi b'musachrina, they're used all the time, and therefore we don't paskin like him. And in fact, the Gemara now brings a raya for the shita that we just saw, Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish against Rav and Shmuel and against Rav Yehuda. Tanya Kavasa de Rav Yochanan Reish Lakish, bimus shenefkam motor, black on white, is that I am allowed to sit on the pedestal that's supported in Avodah Zara if it's cracked. That's what the Gemara says. Mizbeach shenifkam asar ad. However, a mizbeach that was broken, that you're not allowed to use until the majority of it is broken, asks the Gemara. Heichidami bimus, heichidami mizbeach. How would we see what is, I should say, this bimus, this pedestal, and what is a mizbeach? Amar Rav Yaakov Baridi, Amar Rav Yochanan, the last line of the Gimel Amud Beis. Bimus is even achas, mizbeach avonim harbe. When we talk about a bimus, it's only one pedestal. It's a one-piece pedestal, and mizbeach was made out of many large rocks. And says the Gemara, turning to the top of the Daled Amud Beis, we'll learn 4 more lines, and then we'll stop. Amar Chizkiah, perfect timing. Ma'ikra. What is the pasuk that indicates that this is true? So it says the Gemara, a pasuk from Yeshaya. The Gemara says, "Besumo kol avnei mizbeach ke avnei girmenu patzos." That when we see that the mizbeach is broken into small pieces, then lo yakumu asherim ve'chamanim. Then we're not going to have more avodah zara. I'ika ke avnei girmenu patzos. If we have the mizbeach that's broken up and splintered into small rocks, lo yakumu asherim ve'chamanim. Im lav. If the mizbeach is not broken down that way, then yakumu. Then there will be avodah zara. So we'll stop right here at the word Tana. Mir Hashem will pick up tomorrow night. Tomorrow we're going to be behind still one more block, and then Mir Hashem will be able to catch up Wednesday. All right. Wishing you all a beautiful night.